I feel like I've had a concussion ever since the baby arrived. I've been a dad 4 months. This is going to be more of a therapy session than an interview.
You mentioned that you're a comedian. Has that been helpful or a hindrance?
I've gotten a lot of new material out of it. I'm ready to monetize this baby however I can. Has certainly challenged my priorities. The reality of being a comedian is you're on the road a lot. Your brain as a dad is now, I need to do everything. I should have been doing everything.
The dad's testosterone drops slightly right after their baby is born, and it creates a higher sensitivity, and they equate that to some maternal caregiving. Dads produce oxytocin, when they're interacting with their baby.
Welcome to The Critical Window, Brain Building in the First 3 Years. Join us in discussing how parents, healthcare professionals, experts in early childhood development, and community agencies can support a child's first 3 years of development. We unpack the science and share practical strategies for giving every child the best possible start.
I was recently at a Rotary meeting, sharing with the Rotary Club about all the things that we're doing in healthcare, the supports we provide. I had someone come up to me and they said, "Oh, this is great, love it, but you keep talking about moms. What is the role for dad?" I use the word family and caregivers, but I haven't really specifically addressed the role of dads. And this particular dad had lost his wife, and it was a very sad story that he was sharing with me. But I left that conversation thinking I've got to be more intentional in my messaging and my support for dads. Dads serve a variety of roles. I live here in a community, it's a military community here, and so there are dads that are deployed. There are dads that are not physically present during those first couple years of their child or children's life. There are dads who don't have the opportunity to have that daily interaction. And, the circumstances vary, but the end of the day, a dad having a role in their child's life is very important. And so I wanted to be able to begin to highlight that and to hear from dads and hear what kinds of supports do they need? What kind of information are we sending out that maybe could be misinterpreted or we could clarify a little bit better or maybe lean into with more intentionality so that dads see their role and they see supported in that role. So I'm super delighted after that 10-minute introduction to be able to talk with you, to hear from you about, who Joel Byars is, your family, hear about, and I'm going to let you give all the wonderful information about your new addition to your family. So let's just start there. Tell us a little bit about you and how your family's growing.
Joel Byars. I've been a comedian 15 years. And I've been a dad 4 months. So this is going to be more of a therapy session than an interview. I'm going to lay down on the couch and I'm just going to spill all the beans. But it really, it's something, I don't even know where to begin. I haven't slept in 4 months. I feel like I've had a concussion ever since the baby arrived. But just to piggyback on what you did say, there is not really information, or dads aren't as proactive, perhaps, either, to seek the information, but there really isn't any sort of information for a dad of, what should you do beyond, well, be sure to take care of your wife, make sure she gets everything she needs, and kind of that, but nothing specific to how we can be the best version of ourselves for both our spouse and for our child. So I am real excited for the work you're doing, because even at our hospital, which was a great hospital, there wasn't any sort of dialogue around how important these first few years are, and they can affect the trajectory of your child's entire life and well-being. So there just wasn't really an access to the information, so I'm glad that we connected. And I'm happy to really share anything I can from my own personal experience and mistakes and wins and anything to embarrass my family down the line. I'm happy to share with you here today.
I love that. So 4 months. So you're 4 months in. So you're basically an expert and professional, right?
Oh, yeah. It's like riding a bike. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just keep falling. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, as you mentioned that you're a comedian, and I've wondered, has that been helpful or a hindrance to be able to stumble through these last 4 months? Has comedy helped to sustain you
Yes.
or not?
I've gotten a lot of new material out of it. I'm ready to monetize this baby however I can. So I'm ready to on that end. I've got a lot of material out of it, and I've gotten a lot more like feedback after shows of relatability to what I'm talking about, and so many people say congratulations and things like that as well. So on the work side, it's been good, and it's been my best year yet already, and I'm very grateful for the trajectory of my career and how it's going, but having a child has certainly challenged my priorities and challenged what I want to do and who I want to be. So the reality of being a comedian is you're on the road a lot. And I've talked with several friends who, had families and then still were on the road a lot and were gone for things and such. And it's just been 4 months of trying to reprioritize, and I've really started to refocus, booking things locally. I've been on the road some, but not nearly as much. And, I did a corporate event in North Carolina and then was up at like 4 a.m. driving back the next day. Yeah. So it's kind of those kind of things, but I'm really starting to reprioritize, booking a lot of local events. I'm working with a theater here in Atlanta to do a summer series. I'm performing at a lot of country clubs and doing corporate events and things like that. So, and this is something we can get into in terms of like identity and balancing life and your family, and then balancing work and your family, but also is my aspiration to be this nationally touring comedian? Is that really who I want to be anymore? And if not, then what does that look like? So it's been interesting. I've been on the road the least I've ever been in several years, and yet I've made the most money I've made as well. So I think that may be a sign to keep working in this direction and prioritizing family first, really.
Well, you mentioned two things I think that we should highlight. You mentioned being the best version of yourself while also suffering an ongoing concussion, right? But it's that I keep using the word, you'll hear it if you listen to today's podcast that's launching, intentionality. So, there's a ton of research out there about the number of overheard words, particularly in infancy, that there is a higher likelihood that if a child is in a home where there's lots of words overheard, that they're going to have a larger vocabulary, stronger reading skills, and higher cognitive benefits of that immersion in language, right? However, we also have to layer onto that the intentionality piece, because some of this research that we keep referencing out in the kind of education, academia world is a little outdated, 30 years or so. And I say outdated, seminal research stands the test of time, but it's outdated from the perspective, and this is just Stephanie Montgomery talking. We didn't have the influx of social media, screen time, and specifically internet on our smartphones. So I think if we went back and revisited some of this research that says, language development is the key to having a child kindergarten ready or really life ready, I think that still, stands the test of time, but I don't think that we can parcel that as much into socioeconomic determinants as it is intentionality. So being on the road, quality versus quantity. So you could be present, and I'm sure all of us can think about times when we're physically present in a space, but what value did we add to that, right? So when we're thinking about, maybe we're not equipping our families with enough information about what they should be doing. For some families, and I'll go back to the reference, I know your mom, and you've got two sisters. Are you bookend? Are you the middle in between the two?
I'm the baby.
You're the baby. Okay. You're the baby. So when you think about your own parenting experiences, and we don't have a lot of solid memories before age 3.5, 4, but Thinking about your experiences growing up. What role did your mom play? What role did your dad play or not play? What role did grandparents play or not play? You know, that social safety net. Sometimes we use the word tribe, right? Over the years, really since the 1950s, and we became more transient with work and moving around, and the nuclear family was elevated, like, oh, everyone needs 2.5 kids in this nuclear family. And actually, when we look at, from a historical perspective, language and that family unit began to break down, and not as much from the perspective of there's no longer a mom and dad, but just that support role, right? The others in there that you're emulating, that you're talking to, that's a mentor to your family, because your role with you and your wife has probably changed a little bit since day one, right? So you shared with me, thinking about quality and quantity of time, you shared with me, you know, the balance, not just with work and life balance, which I'm super excited, work balance is going well right now, but within your relationship with your wife. So share a little bit about how that's changed and things you're learning as a dad that you're like, oh, well, I could have been doing that all along. Or I think I can do that when Daphne's a little bit older. So share a little bit about that, the role inside a husband-wife relationship.
Yeah, and that is something I maybe wish I knew before. Having a child is just that relationship dynamic changing, and you being the only two people in your lives, essentially, and our dog, of course. We can never forget our dog, who resents the baby every day. But
is Guinness 5 pounds or 4? Like, it's just
he's 10 pounds, but you know, he's bulking up to try to defend us against our baby. But yeah, so it's a new relationship dynamic to where there is a lot more, like, really, you mentioned in being intentional. You do have to be more intentional about spending time together, communicating. And fortunately for us, we have worked very hard at that even before having a child, of being able to communicate very candidly and transparent, and having just that candor and trust with each other. So fortunately, we developed that skill before having a baby, and now with a baby, we catch ourselves almost having to learn a new level of communication and checking in with each other, and making sure there is some sort of balance in a sense. Sometimes, you know, it's 80-20 or, you know, 30-70 in one direction or the other, and just making sure if we can always just be aware of what the other person is taking on, and then try to make sure that they're balancing it out. Like, the other spouse is able to balance it out in some way. So she, for like example, she works from home every day, but like one day a week she'll have to go into the office. So we're very intentional when she does go in the office that we FaceTime several times throughout the day. And if she knows that it's been a stressful day here, she's like mindful of that and willing to take on more of the baby's attention that evening or the next day and whatnot. Or if I'm gone, like I mentioned, driving back at 4 a.m. to get back early enough so I could be there to support her because I was gone the night before. It's things like that you just have to make an effort to do. They're not going to do themselves. Problems aren't, or miscommunications aren't going to go away if you ignore them. So it really forces you to have a new level of responsibility, not only to your child, but to your spouse as well, which is something I didn't really expect. I think I saw like an interview clip where a guy was talking about how when he had a child, he didn't realize how much he would miss his wife after having a child. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to cry. But it adds just a whole other layer to your relationship that ideally you're in it together and you adapt and you make the most of it, and it just brings you closer together, which I'm very grateful to say for us, it has brought us closer together. But it's not without that intentional effort you have to work on every day, every hour, really.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like that you did a lot of prep work in advance of, working on that relationship. And two things you talk about, communication and trust. So I'm going to pull in just from the neurological development. We are at Build a Brain, very much focused on the 0 to 3, which we're now coining the critical window. And while 4 and 5-year-olds are not equally important in terms of how a child's brain is developing during those first 3 years, 80 to 85% of their brain architecture for future learning is being developed. And I don't know that I'd say I wasn't aware of that when I was a young mom, which is huge. And so when we think about language, so language is peaking between 6 months and 12 months in a child. And so it's kind of a head scratcher, like, really? Because mine's not talking to me in complete sentences. That's pretty fascinating. But I liken it to an iceberg. There's a lot happening underneath. And so they're absorbing, they're picking up. And it's not just the words, but it's the tone and the frequency and the playfulness and the intentionality again around language being heard. So they're little sponges and they're taking all that in, communication, and also their emotional control, or later we may call that self-regulation, the ability to respond appropriately. And all that is also happening there. That curve is a little bit longer into 18 months, but 0 to 18 months. So how we're responding with our child, because again, they can't ask for a diaper change or I'm hungry, I'd like some goldfish. It's mostly crying at the beginning, and then they begin to coo and gurgle and emulate. But that comes later. But if they're denied of that in that first year to 18 months, it really does kind of lessen the likelihood that they'll have those strong outcomes later on, because again, we're building that foundation, those neural connections for future learning to happen. And so I can, run that parallel with your relationship prior to becoming a dad and now moving forward. You had to build that infrastructure and foundation. And so when you layer on lack of sleep, new work-life balance, for some families, it's an additional financial burden to them. So there's a lot of stressors that come with becoming a family, adding another mouth to feed and diaper to change and all that. So if you haven't had opportunity to really strengthen that foundation, it's going to show up here. So you talked about 30, 70 and all that. And I really appreciate that you didn't frame it as a 50-50, because it's not. And I think I've heard Brene Brown say before, and I apologize if I misquote this, Brene, but having a check-in, it sounds like you're doing that with Aaron, having a check-in to say, hey, today all I have is 30%. So I'm going to need you to do 70. Or today, hey, we've had a great day. Like, I was able to go today and my cup was filled and I've got 80%. So if you've got 20, I'll meet you there. And in some ways, and you can share more about this with me, you're in the grips of it. In some ways, that may be taking care of the baby to show up as 80%, or that might be run to the grocery store, doing laundry, and unload the dishes so that she can just hold the baby and be with the baby, because she's been trying to juggle. Tell me a little bit about that, what it looks like when you balance, because it's not the same task in the same role in the same way.
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to touch on the baby observing us and our communication and tone and stuff. And we're also intentional about how we communicate with each other, and also in front of her, making sure that we're affectionate and really just leading with love in everything we do, and really setting that precedent. So just want to touch on that in terms of communication. But really, for balance, it's really giving her every opportunity to spend quality time with the baby as possible. So it is doing the meal prep. It is doing the dishes. It is going to the grocery store. It is deadheading the roses. Roses were our other baby before our baby arrived. So we have several of those we're still taking care of. And that's been a nice outlet for us as well, to balancing that life with the baby. Is also, hey, we have a world we're bringing her into. We're not changing everything just because we have a baby now in that sense. But it is, part of it can be, okay, I'll take her for a little while just to give you a break. And other times it is, I'll just go and do all the things you don't have to think about. cleaning before family arrives, things like that. Because anytime family visits, our house is perfect, and it always is that way.
White gloves.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, really doing all those things just to try to declutter any obligations or things she's feeling she should do. Mm-hmm. I would prefer, and I am proactive in taking on that burden just so she can be, like you mentioned, quality time, spending the time she does have with our baby with as much quality and the least amount of stress, which can also transfer between parents and baby as possible. So, yeah, that is all part of it, really, is just what can I do to minimize the amount of stress in her life, while also there's that balance of your own self-care as well, which I don't think dads prioritize as much or really know as much information about. I think dads can also go through postpartum depression. I fortunately, and we do check in with each other, but fortunately, in terms of that, there doesn't seem to be, neither of us really going through it in some sort of way that's alarming, at least, that we're noticing, but we are very mindful of checking in with each other on that into things as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a definite balance of, like, your brain as a dad is now, I need to do everything. I should have been doing everything. Or like, oh gosh, I've got to figure it out now. Or always like, I should be doing more. So just making sure that fulfilling your duties as a dad, but also self-care is a part of what gives you the ability to be your best self, to be your best dad and your best spouse.
Absolutely.
So self-care is very important, and being able to wake up early, just exercising, trying to eat right, all those basic things that you read. When you read about all these things you should be doing for your baby, you're like, oh, I should be doing this for me too. Yeah. Like, it's almost a reminder of like, oh yeah.
Well, absolutely. Well, you're reflecting back. It's almost a mirror. We talked about, or I talk about, this isn't usually like party conversation, mirror neurons. I talk about mirror neurons, but within a couple of hours of your baby being born, she has something called mirror neurons that are activated. And it's really the brain's way of reflecting back, taking in, assimilating what's happening in their environment. So when you're sticking out your tongue or blowing bubbles or, up close, about 8 to 12 inches is where you should be from her face when she's very young. And then you can start moving out, but she doesn't have the clarity of vision at that time. It's a lot of shades of gray and kind of muted. So you need to be up close. But those mirror neurons are activated, and that's just part of the brain's design to learn from their environment. So, when you're talking about picking up on stress and, postpartum depression, things of that nature, you're right. It's kind of like when someone yawns in a room or even over the phone. Like, how do you pick that up? Like, I don't really understand that one. That's a separate podcast. But you do kind of take that on. The brain is just pretty fascinating to me. On the positive side, dads produce oxytocin, when they're interacting with their baby. And some dads, in things that I've read and talking with dads, there's at times a hesitancy because they're so small and they may be medically compromised. They may be having difficulty with breastfeeding. Number of reasons why dad may not have the opportunities to really get in there and hold and touch their infant. A lot of research says that, as the baby grows and it kind of begins to peak around 6 months, that dad's oxytocin is at its highest because they're able to do more of that playful interaction with children. So, kind of differences in testosterone and estrogen, and the dad's testosterone drops slightly right after their baby is born, and it creates a higher sensitivity, and they equate that to some maternal caregiving. So it's all, what you're saying is really grounded in that physiological chemical change that happens, which is just pretty miraculous to me. But keeping in check, making sure that you're still showing up for yourself and your partner, so that you can provide your child the best opportunity. But I do want to say here, we're not about perfect parenting. We're about present parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And we really hope that everyone through the journey becomes a better version of their self because of the journey. And it's important that everyone continues to grow and develop. What are you doing differently now with your baby that you maybe didn't do or did, within the first couple weeks? What's changed in how you interact with your baby and the things you can or can't do?
Yeah, and it's really interesting you mentioned the oxytocin of a dad peaking around 6 months. And yeah, I definitely want to imply I'm not speaking from a place of perfect or having it figured out at all.
No.
But just wanted to clarify that for anyone listening. I'm like, oh, he seems to have it together. And I was like, I'm wearing pajama pants below it. So I just want everyone to know.
Thank you. I took my shoes off when we started.
But yeah, it's really interesting and something I didn't expect, that I don't know if other dads had this experience, but it's like when the baby was born, well, first, the doctor wanted me to do like the gender reveal, basically because we didn't know what the gender was going to be going into it, which if people are thinking about having a baby or in the middle of it and they're not sure the gender yet, that was a really fun thing to do together. Like my wife and I, it was almost like this little thing we could share throughout this journey of just the baby arriving, is we have this thing we're sharing that we don't know what the gender is, because everyone always asks you, well, are you having a boy or a girl? And we're like, oh, we don't know. And it's different. People don't really do that anymore. So it's just kind of a fun little game you have with your spouse that you're kind of carrying throughout the pregnancy process. So something I would definitely recommend that just kind of makes it a little more fun and unique and different and special. It's something that you both are sharing together. Our doctors got annoyed. I think every time we met, we're like, we don't want to know the gender. We don't want to know the gender. Every time we went into a doctor's office. But fortunately, we didn't know until she was born. And the doctor held up the baby. She's like, all right, Dad, reveal the gender. And then I was just staring at my baby. I mean, birth is a whole other thing. But they're just holding up my baby, and I was like speechless. I was just like, a girl? I literally I was shocked and amazed about just the whole thing. But to kind of get back to how my interaction with the baby has changed, it's like when she was first born, you maybe feel like there's this movie moment to where the clouds part and now all of life makes sense. You have now become whole, and just immediately you're like, oh, this is now my life, and everything is now into place. There was the missing puzzle piece, but it really is kind of confusing in some ways of like, well, I'm not really feeling that. And is that okay? Am I a sociopath? What is happening here? And I'm assuming other dads feel that way, but it's, I say all that to say the more I'm now around the baby and the more I interact with her, and we're getting closer and closer every day. And I think, like you said, the oxytocin is ramping up. We're now at 4 months. Every day I feel closer and closer to her, but it was a perspective I would have appreciated before having the child, that when your child arrives, it may not be this like abracadabra moment to now life, just you see life in a whole new like lens, which I do now. And the baby wasn't born and I was like, oh, that's not mine, or what is this? It was more of just like, oh gosh, what now type deal, you know? And I would have appreciated hearing that perspective early on, to not then have that self-doubt of like, is it okay to feel this way? Why am I feeling this way? Instead of just like, okay, this is all part of it, that, it's not just this movie moment for everyone. So that was a surprise.
Yeah. Well, I have said before, I think motherhood is a conspiracy. Like, no one really talks about the ugly, the bad. You just, it is like, you just smile and go, oh, it's wonderful. love them. And if we were honest, Mother's Day is coming up soon. There's probably a lot of moms. It's like, I just want to be left alone. I don't even want to see my children on Mother's Day. Not because I don't love them, but it is, a life-changing thing that you can't fully prepare for until you enter into it. And as you were expressing, some of it comes just from that interactions, whether that's daily interactions, frequent interactions as the baby is growing and responding more to the voice and having more independence. They're turning their head because they're beginning to recognize their name. They are mirroring back some of what you're giving out. Mm-hmm. At the very beginning, it feels slightly one-sided. Like you're doing it wrong, right? And baby's there just to be cute, and everyone wants to come see the cute baby, and they're like, well, I'm doing all the work here,
Yeah. I'm the one up at 2 a.m. with this crying baby,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we don't really talk about that. You're right. So we almost paint it like a Disney picture of sorts. And it's not the reality. Have there been times, and I'm going to go back to, by career and personality, you're very comedic, right? You find the silver lining and find the joy and humor in everyday life events. But have there been times when you felt at a loss and maybe struggling with your patience or how to respond or show up to the baby?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, and it just happens unexpectedly. I was just like, I don't I tried to have a joke about it, but it wouldn't. It was like I was talking about the shush technique and how you just shush her, and then the joke is basically like I'm shushing her, which then turns into me just going, "Shut up, shut up," and then I'm shoving Benadryl in her face, and and I was there. I'm not yelling "Shut up" at my baby. It's clearly it's an exaggeration for comedic effect.
Subliminally.
Yes, but there is I have had moments where I just say I love you aggressively, and it's probably when she's just crying nonstop. Mm-hmm. I wish I could give you a specific example. It all blurs together, but there definitely have been moments to where I'm annoyed and I have done something like, "Oh, I love you." Oh, or I just step away for a minute. She's just crying there, not for too long, but just let me just reset really quick. Mm-hmm. Which, these are all things I didn't, I mean, there's no way to expect to prepare for any of this, but I've definitely have not had my proudest moments, but I'm happy to say, I mean, I haven't also had any maybe traumatic moments, I would hope, to where I am just
toddlerhood is coming. Toddlerhood is coming, and they will absolutely humiliate you just being a toddler.
Really?
And saying things that they picked up and maybe they use out of context, or they're not quite potty trained, but they're eating real adult food and you're out to eat. Those kinds of things. It's wow. I used to be a prideful person, and now my shirt's on backwards, and it's just all bets are out the window. We just
What is the threshold? What is the how many of those blow-ups can you have before it imprints on their brain forever and becomes part of their personality?
Well, I think being mindful of stepping away and being in check with yourself, because the crying is frustrating, because at the end of the day, you want to solve the problem. That's how they're communicating, right? And so when they're crying, there's a need that they have that's not been addressed. And you're like, I'm the grown adult here. My job is to take care of the well-being and safety of this child. And so, sometimes you do just have to step away. Or sometimes it may be lying on your back next to your child and they're, in a safe space, and you just have your hand on them and you're just taking some deep breaths. I think that's really important for them to know that you're still there. Mm-hmm. Right? And having that physical touch is very, very important. But they do. I mean, they have stressors like we have stressors, and just taking each moment as it comes, because it sometimes blindsides you. Yeah. And when you're sleep deprived, and
Yes.
there's other stressors on you that happen just in life, you don't have that long runway of patience and clarity. Your amygdala is hijacked. The blood flow to the part of your brain that helps in the decision making has slowed down. So, just understanding that and giving yourself grace, I think, is very important.
Whoa.
And it's
I didn't
real.
realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a real thing. Well, and in some show notes that you sent me ahead of time, you talked about the skin to skin and the diaper change. Those are wonderful opportunities for dad just to talk. I think, as we think about, you said, I wish I had known a little bit more about the dad's role or what to expect, or maybe some preconceived notions, about this journey of fatherhood. Talking with your baby, this is something my husband has brought up many times. He said, I didn't really get why you would talk to your baby and read to your baby. He said, I did because I was kind of guilt-shamed into doing it. He said, I didn't really understand. And I think it's important, when you're changing diapers or walking them around, patting them on the back, and they're screaming, and they've been screaming, and it's 3 a.m. Talking to them is still very important. One, it's calming you down, so it benefits both of you, but just the cadence and sound of your voice. They're still learning language. They're still picking up on what we later call phonemes, so sound structures of language. Is still very important. Singing. Recently, I read something that's kind of fascinating to me. That it's preferable if if your child is sleeping, or maybe they're just having idle play. White noise is not recommended. There's white noise machines that really something with melody is actually preferred. If you're going to have something on background, some kind of music with a melody and even words is more beneficial than just a static white noise. Again, because they're wired in those first 3 years to absorb patterns in language that they'll use later on. So I think that's kind of interesting. But also just talking to dads about the importance of language. You don't have to baby talk. You can. Get asked sometimes, at what point should you stop using baby talk? What's the difference in baby talk and parentese? So parentese is really the inflection in your voice and changing the tone, the speed, the prosody of your voice, because you're just piquing those, sensory interests. The auditory system is like paying attention as you go up and down and elevate your voice, like, if you're saying, ooh, it looks like you have a stinky diaper, let's go change you. Ooh,
Okay.
That kind of stuff. And baby talk is more the gaga goo goo. And so you can do baby talk, and they'll can imitate that. But if you're working toward language, it's more of the sing-song, what's called parentese.
Oh,
and that's just changing the inflection and tone and what you're saying. Now, you don't want to sit down and read, Robert Frost or something like that to your child, but you really can be reading something for your own pleasure, self-care, but reading it in a parentese way. So it's really the quality of the interaction. It's not like we're going to give them a quiz on, you're reading the Wall Street Journal, right?
Right.
So I saw you recently did a reel about Dr. Seuss.
Nobody told me this before becoming a parent, that Dr. Seuss books are novels. I'm halfway through this thing, reading to my baby, and I feel like I'm doing homework. Like, I want her to finish all of it. Even my dog he's gagging at how long and absurd this book is. It's 61 pages, y'all.
So I wanted to make sure before we close, this might be a fun way, before we close, to talk about Dr. Seuss. So, what do you read? And I've got a couple books here behind me. So Dr. Seuss, to me, it kind of goes along with that parentese, sing-song, playful, melodic experience, right? So it's not like we're expecting our child to be able to come up with 5 rhymes with the word jam after hearing the book. It's really the playing of language that Dr. Seuss was so interested in. But you don't have to read Dr. Seuss just because it is, kind of nostalgic of sorts. And I give everyone permission. You don't have to read the whole book. You don't even have to read the words on the pages. Again, it's your language with your baby. I'll give you another little tip real quick.
Yeah.
When you're seated with your baby, if you could actually sit down on the floor, you could do it on the couch, just be careful. But if you sit down on the floor and you bend your knees, kind of like a 45-degree angle, put your baby in your lap so that the baby's facing you. So you're just kind of like this. So you're seated on your bum, knees bent, baby facing you, and then put the book on your chest. And so as you're reading, and I'm using air quotes here, as you're reading the book to your baby, they're seeing the pictures and they're seeing your facial expressions. Because that's the thing. We want them to associate words and your facial expressions and how your body communicates language. And you know this with the work that you do. Like your body language and your gestures go just as far. Your pausing goes just as far. That can make or break a joke, right?
Right.
So when you're reading to your child, try that so they can see your face, they can see the pages in the book, and it's more experiential.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Definitely something I'm going to take away from this is just thinking of the quality of the interactions as well. Not just like trying to like check a box of like, oh, I read a book, I'm a good dad, but trying to more than like get through the book, just try to make the most of every page, because it's really more about the interaction with the baby and making sure that they're stimulated and engaged.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that is for future dads. Yeah, we're very fortunate, at least the amount of books we have and that were given to us. I think people just accumulate books and then pass them down to people they know have babies. I think one family friend just gave us 2 crates and was like, good, now this is your junk, or this is your stuff, basically. So we have a lot of books. Llama Llama Red Pajama. If anyone needs a copy, I will pay you to take it. Just let me know your address and I will pay you and ship it to you. But we're very fortunate. We have a whole library now of books, and the reel I posted about Dr. Seuss was just, I didn't realize how long the books were. It was like 61 pages. I was like halfway through it, like, this is homework. This is, but now I know I don't have to finish them, so I'll just, teach that to my baby. You don't have to finish what you start. You do what you feel. There's no accountability in this world. Just do what you do.
This is true.
That is something, and just you touching on earlier about how my interactions have changed with the baby. It is like I feel more connected with her, and we are more conversational now, and I'm more playful, and I'm doing more of that parentee. We never really did baby talk, but definitely like the parentee, like you mentioned. Is that what it's called? Parentees?
Parentees.
Okay, yeah. So, I'm definitely doing more and more of that every day, and feeling super connected to her now. But those early few days, I was just like, everything just, it was just expectation versus reality, I think, can be jarring for people, especially when you first have the baby. So, Dr. Seuss, Hungry Caterpillar, Llama Llama Red Pajama, all the Olivia books. We try to keep mixing it up, but always, if there's a book she's really engaged with, to read that one several times. Yeah,
I would encourage you to read the same one over and over. And as you move toward sleep schedules, nap schedules, it could be that the book is kind of the trigger. So if it's the same one every day that you're reading at the same time to produce the desired outcome, that book serves as the trigger.
For like a nap. We would like to figure out nap time. That is something that's all over the place. Yeah.
Well, increasing sensory opportunities prior to the nap time, but maybe it's the repetition of the same book, and it's something more, perhaps a little like Goodnight Moon, something a little more. I don't want mundane's not the right word, but not as much vibrancy and There's just something to try there.
Oh,
Okay,
definitely
so my last question for you. Do you think that the baby will say mama or dada?
Oh, man. I'll say mama, because I don't want to be in the doghouse with Guinness. Guinness and I are going to be sharing the couch. I'll say mama, but probably dada. Probably.
Well, there's a little bit of research to support both M and D. Are produced in the front of the mouth. So say mama.
Mama.
It's in the front. And then dada.
Dada. Uh-huh.
So a lot of those early language behaviors, like early on, we're like going, la, 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 we're doing stuff with our tongue, right? And
right.
So that is a little bit easier to produce than but it could be that she says dog first. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, there are moments of like, did you say something? Or anytime we say I love you, she totally like reacts and will sometimes try to mirror it, which is very interesting that she almost knows what love is already.
Yeah. Well, she's been with you 9 + 5, 14 months. So yeah, I've heard of shorter love affairs, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so incredibly much. I've enjoyed this and can talk much longer, but you've got a business to run.
I appreciate you and you having me, and I appreciate all the work you're doing. It really is having a positive impact. Just in the short amount of time we've been talking, it's really had a positive impact, and just the information. I know people want to make the best lives for their kids and their families, and we just don't have the information right now beyond don't look at your iPad,
right.
So I think what you're doing is very important. I'm excited to help any way I can.
Thanks.
And if anyone enjoyed this episode and wants to connect with me, they could go to my website, joelbyerscomedy.com, or if you want to book me for any events, I do clean comedy, you can go there. And I'd love to hear from you, even if you just listened to the episode and enjoyed it. I'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we'll make sure that when we're getting show notes together that we include how they could get in touch with you, because you're right. You do have a lot of relatable material now. If we don't laugh, we cry, right? So we got to laugh.
Yes.
We got to laugh. Laugh at life. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.
Of course. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you for listening to The Critical Window. If today's episode sparked new ideas or insights, we'd love for you to subscribe and share it with others. Visit buildabrainnow.com for show notes and resources, and to connect with our growing community. Until next time, remember, every interaction shapes a developing brain.